You are watching NovaNow.tv, independent community media for Northern Virginia.
Hello and welcome to NovaNow.tv. I am your host, Sam Ettaro, coming to you from my virtual studios in beautiful Fairfax County, Virginia. And yet again, education-related topics in the spotlight tonight on NovaNow.tv. So, I don't need to tell you, we are facing a big push. Vaccine mandates all across the spectrum, across the United States. People losing their jobs, not just their jobs, but entire careers en masse. Lots of pressure being put on every segment of our population. Well, there's another mandate that's taking place locally here in Nova. We found out about a program that is kicking off, well, was supposed to have kicked off here at the beginning of the month, but has been pushed up a little bit. Loudoun County and Fairfax County are implementing a Virginia Health Department program that we are going to talk about tonight and give you a heads up with a very special guest from Loudoun County. So this evening, the VSSTA program, Virginia School Screening Testing for Assurance Program. What is it? How is it going to help our society or hurt our society? And some of the concerns of folks that are learning about this rollout here in Northern Virginia. Our special guest tonight, Clint Thomas, who recently made waves on the internet with his speech up at the recent Loudoun County School Board meeting. And I'm going to go ahead and set this up before I bring him into the show as the guest. So I'm going to set this up and play his speech and his follow-up by his wife to the school board. This is not related to the COVID testing that we're going to talk about tonight, but it gives you an indication as to who our guest is. So here we go.
I'm a Loudoun parent with kids in this school system, and I'm here to expose further cover-ups, which just keep adding up. Pay attention, media. There's word now of yet another high school predator that's been transferred from Dominion to Woodgrove after he attacked a teacher. We have daughters at Woodgrove. There's also word of a Freedom High School teacher who's been transferred to Belmont Ridge 3 weeks ago after sexual impropriety with a student. It's been learned 5 years ago there was yet another sexual assault on a freshman girl at Tuscarora High School, which some on this board covered up. Scott, why are you so close to the Commonwealth Attorney? It seems like our kids are being used as pawns in some social reform game. Scott, why did you have a private, non-FOIable meeting with the Commonwealth Attorney on October 15th? At that fundraiser that you and I both attended? We witnessed it. Why am I still waiting on the page that was missing from the FOIA results on how you plan to spend the 11 hours tied to your masking and testing mandates? Resign tonight, all of you, and end the mockery you've all brought in this great county.
Aaron John. Scott, I've seen the May 28th email you sent to the board informing them about the first rape. You lied to us and covered this up. You have a doctorate in education and didn't understand the question? And why did it take 2 rapes before you finally came to the mic? These cover-ups keep adding up, and the next time we'll do better argument doesn't work. This is now about our kids' safety and real equity and protecting them from you. Brenda, as chair of this nearly $2 billion organization, why weren't you at the mic? You hired this superintendent. You're just as much to blame for the embarrassment and legal liability brought onto this county as he is. And you ran on a platform of more recess. More recess. We have girls getting raped, teachers, subs, bus driver shortages, not to mention books in our schools that would make Masters and Johnsons blush. And you want more recess? I invite you all to take more recess and step down immediately. The dad got suspended jail time and the rapist went free and raped again. And he did. You're all responsible and it's time to go.
So there you have it. the Thomases in action up in Loudoun County. So this episode of NovaNow.tv, we're going to dig in with Clint Thomas about the Virginia School Screening Testing for Assurance Program. Clint Thomas, thank you so much for joining us on NovaNow.tv, and thank you so much for all of your work that you have been doing up there in Loudoun County. We really appreciate you coming on, and great job there at the board meeting, both you and your wife.
Sam, thanks for having me on. It's really great to be with you again and just spend a few minutes highlighting this really important topic. And
it is important. I actually have the document that you sent me a couple weeks ago when you brought this to my attention. And I do have it up on the screen. So what I would like to do is you can walk us through this if you would like, any particular points that you want to bring out, and we can highlight it in live time. And of course, this is a public document that was made available. Clint, well, I'll tell you what, Clint, why don't you set this up? Tell us a little bit about what brought this to your attention, how you came about being concerned, and then we're going to get into some of the points that really concern you about this new testing program. So you have the floor, sir.
Yeah, thank you. It was maybe a month or two ago now, we realized that Scott Ziegler had, I think it was the end of August of this year, had implemented a mandatory vax or test mandate on student athletes. And we happen to have a student athlete at Woodgrove High School. She's on in the soccer program there. And we started looking into this further, and we realized that she was literally going to be forced out of her soccer program unless she played along with Dr. Ziegler's mandate, which on the surface looks pretty innocent. Hey, if you're not vaccinated for COVID, no problem. You can just take a test. And as long as you're COVID negative, what's the big deal? You can continue going to your practices. But we started looking into this further and realized that, wait a minute, it's weekly testing. Wait a minute, it's the mid-nasal test. They still, to my knowledge, don't have a vendor in place that will do other than that. And then we realized that many of the teachers were also in the same boat, teachers, bus drivers, coaches. And so it's a much more onerous mandate than people realize. And Dr. Ziegler did this on his own. It was something that the school board abdicated their role on, and they deferred to his authority alone as one unelected man. So we really have a problem with that. And we went through the process of submitting a religious exemption because we do feel strongly against this mandate. We feel like mandates in this regard are evil and totalitarian. But it really comes down to, we also don't believe that it's any of their business what my daughter's private medical information is. And so we're taking that stand. And so started digging more into how the school plans to implement this testing program. And I found the 19-page playbook called VSSTA, the Virginia School Screening Testing for Assurance Program. And I learned that it's a state grant that Loudoun County Public Schools is applying to get into, put on by the Virginia Department of Health and the VDOE. As you can see, their logos there on the document. And this document, 19 pages, goes into great detail about how they plan to roll out this testing program, and it's clearly geared toward all students. I really believe this is going to be something probably coming next fall, 2022, for all students across Virginia, not just student athletes. Student athletes are sort of just the testing ground. It was a mandate that Dr. Ziegler put into place based on a very limited sample size. There was only 13 athletic-related cases for all of last school year across 81,000 students. This year, to my knowledge, last I heard, there was only one athletic-related COVID case. So I feel like the mandate is certainly not necessary, especially for teens. I won't even get into my thoughts on the vaccine itself, but I don't feel like it's right for a school system to mandate that my student athlete requires weekly testing. So that's the background. The program itself, some may have heard, is now delayed. The effective date of the vax or test mandate is now delayed to November 29th. By that date, all teachers and staff and student athletes must either show proof of COVID vaccination or give consent into the VSSTA program. And I believe Loudoun County Public Schools is now in the process of joining the VSSTA program to receive the state funding. If a student athlete or school teacher does not submit to the testing program, they will have to go on unpaid leave, which is constructive termination, or a student athlete will literally be told, sorry, you can't come to practice or participate in VHSL programming. I feel like that's wrong, especially when our student athletes have worked so hard to be part of the sports programs over the years. So
it sounds very similar to the program that is happening here in Fairfax County, where county employees, same thing. You either, well, first it starts with disclosing your vaccination status, and then it goes to if you choose to opt for an exemption and or granted any exemptions, then or you refuse to disclose your status, or you disclose your status and you say I'm not vaccinated. In any of those three cases, you have to subject yourself to weekly testing, or you're not permitted to enter back into the workplace. I mean, that's what's happening with all county employees down in Fairfax County. How is that differ? I wonder, have you dug into that a little bit? How does that differ from this VISTA program?
Well, first of all, you're hearing in the news these days a lot of the uproar across the country, New York, Maine, other areas where workers are being forced out of their jobs because they're not even being given a religious exemption and no reasonable accommodation is given. Some think that testing is deemed reasonable accommodation, so what's the big deal? Well, if you have a medical condition that doesn't allow a stick to be pushed up your nose, that's not reasonable accommodation. So when I started digging into the VISTA program and what it's really all about, it's really sinister. And I wanted to go through a few of the details with you. A lot of folks don't realize that it actually creates a second class of student, a second class of teacher. These testing programs, with VISTA in particular, is only going to test the unvaccinated. And I don't know about you, I'm not a scientist, but I read many reports that clearly show that the vaccinated still carry the virus, still transmit the virus. There's breakthrough infection. Why are we testing just the unvaccinated? If we're going to test anyone, we should be testing everyone. That's the first thing I have a problem with.
I'm glad you brought that up. That's something that I brought up as well, actually, to our union reps here in Fairfax County, in as much as, to me, that strikes me as discriminatory, blatantly discriminatory, because if indeed the science, if we're following the science, and we know that the science says that vaccinated folks can spread it, can catch it, and can spread it, then we're discriminating against those that are choosing to not take it. When everybody, for the benefit of everyone, should be tested, if that's the end game, right? And I don't hear a lot of people talking about that, the discriminatory aspect of all of these testing programs. I'm glad you're focusing on that.
Yes, this is not just a vax mandate, it's a testing mandate.
Mm-hmm.
They want you to test and test and test again, and I'll prove why I say that. Once you consent into this VISTA program, you have no longer any control over what pool you're placed in. And when I started reading the pool testing model that VISTA implements, it's really concerning to me. It's sort of dehumanizing. They are actually going to collect samples and pool them together. So first of all, you consent into the program. You are then placed in a pool of between 5 to 25 people. And they're literally going to pool your saliva test or your mid-nasal swab test into one sample that goes to the lab.
Clint, let me stop you there, because you sent me a bullet point list of some of your concerns, and we're getting into this here. What I would like to do is pull up the document, as you saw in the screen share there, and let's go through this documentation. You can see it right on your screen if you just take a look. So you give me direction as to where to go, and let's go ahead and pull this up and show the documentation. This is the VISTA, Virginia School Screening Testing for Assurance Program. The playbook, as they say. What am I looking at here? We're talking about the nature of the testing, which is pooled testing, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Here it is.
I don't have the page numbers.
Right here, page 14 on the document.
The flowchart actually is very helpful if you want to go to page 14.
Yep, that's what it says. Pooled testing flowchart. There it is.
So think about this, Sam. Your child, or if you're a teacher, you're literally dehumanized. And your sample is pulled together and one sample is sent to the lab. And here's what people don't even know about VSTA yet. They actually, once the lab report comes back, if it comes back positive for that pooled sample, then everyone, it's going to lay that out here. Everyone in that pool must retest within 24 hours. Otherwise, the whole pool is deemed to be COVID positive. And if a COVID positive designation is made, a case investigation is opened by our local health department.
Let me shrink this down so we can follow the whole thing here.
Yeah.
Let me get that on the screen. Okay, so start us at the beginning here. The samples are collected, and explain the pooling process. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so again, you have to consent into the program. You're told which pool you're going to be in and when you're supposed to come and report for testing, on what schedule. And so whatever that is, right now they're starting with weekly, but honestly, if the average count per 1,000 goes above a certain threshold, it's in the document. I believe it's once it's over 50, if I recall, then they actually go to twice a week testing. But you basically are submitted, you go to the testing site at the school. The school is right now planning to pay for it, from what we can tell, under the state funding. You're basically administered the test, either a saliva test or a mid-nasal swab test based on the VSTA guidance. Then your entire pool, your samples get combined into one pooled sample that goes to the lab. Okay? The lab does its work, they come back, and if you're negative, everything's fine until the next week's test. If it's positive, as you can see here, if you keep scrolling down, then everyone in this pool then must retest within 24 hours. Otherwise, the whole pool is deemed to be COVID positive. Think about that. If one person says, no, I don't want to test, you then, as a member of that pool, are now deemed COVID positive by the system. And then you and all your close contacts have to quarantine. And a case investigation is opened by the local Department of Health.
Wow.
It's very onerous. So these are things people don't realize, how deep this testing program goes as it's currently written. They are going to have case investigations opened, quarantining, which is right now the quarantine period is 10 days. But many don't realize, Sam, that they don't track close contacts for the vaccinated. But the vaccinated still carry the virus. So once you're vaccinated, the big secret here is all the close contact tracing goes away. So that's why there's such a push here with getting the vax, because all of a sudden the school system no longer has to track close contacts, and they can keep playing their sports. They can keep teachers in classrooms.
So now we're back to the contact tracing, which we haven't heard very much about over the past 6 months or so. But what you're pointing out here is that this is going to be a funnel that the unvaccinated or those that are refusing one way or another to disclose and take part in this is going to be pushed into. And now you use the word onerous, or you're very concerned about the impact that this could be having on individuals and their lives. I mean, not just a kid getting kicked off of a football team, but let's look at this. Students, staff member tests as having COVID-19, right? The individual in the pool, then the individual is directed to isolate for 10 days, case investigation conducted according to CDC guidelines, which will include quarantining unvaccinated close contacts. Now, is that for the whole pool, or?
No, this is the second test you're looking at. So we've already gotten past where the pool was positive.
Individual confirmatory testing is needed, dependent on the vendor. Vendor conducts additional analysis on sample collected. Okay, so the pool of, let's just pick out an arbitrary number of 10 people. Somebody in there tested positive, right?
But they don't know who it is.
But they don't know who it is, right?
So they have to go back and retest.
So they retest everybody individually?
Yes.
Okay. Tested individuals notified next. No effort of their action. Individual tested as positive. Now, I'm looking at this, and just to play devil's advocate here, no pun intended, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with this model in your mind? Because it looks to me they're casting a broad net to try to determine those that may need further testing. Where do you see, or where do you have a rub there?
Well, I answer that from a business perspective.
Okay.
As a business owner myself, and also from a citizen perspective.
Okay.
From a business perspective, if you read their 385-page budget, Loudoun County Public Schools is nearly a $2 billion enterprise when you factor in their CIP and the cap reserves. About $1.5 billion operating budget. What in the world is an enterprise this large, with all these subsidiaries in construction and building maintenance and transportation and food delivery and education, which should be the priority? Why in the world, when we're having trouble getting teachers to cover our classrooms and subs, why are we getting into the testing business? That's my business hat thinking like that. Okay. From a citizen standpoint, I'm like, well, it's really pretty onerous to think about where this could go. Can we get back to education? Can we get back to educating our kids? Why do we have all the sexually explicit books that we do in the libraries? There's so many more that keep coming out. Why do we have more and more cover-ups coming almost on a weekly basis now, some of which I mentioned in my talk? That seems like we need to get back to education. What in the world are we doing with such a detailed, onerous testing program? Where is this really going? And honestly, I think it's because LCPS, BDOE, BDH, Loudoun County Health Department, CDC, they're all tied together. They got to push this back for some reason. And I don't know where it's headed. I have my personal beliefs, but from a school system perspective, it certainly makes it easy on them because they don't have to track close contacts anymore.
Have you dug into the business any deeper? I mean, we talk about contractors and those that are going to be contracted to provide these services to these multi-billion-dollar school districts. Have you dug into who these companies are?
Not in detail. I've had conversations with the Loudoun County Director of Athletics and Mr. Ferry. And last I spoke with him, they were still working on identifying closing on a contract with the right vendors that would provide the necessary testing. I also have been told by Dr. Ziegler that they were in process of still trying to finalize the enrollment in the VISTA program. So I think that was in part, possibly part of the reason why they delayed the effective date from November 1st to November 29th. It may be delayed again for all I know. But there's a whole lot of teachers and bus drivers and student athlete parents for their kids who are standing up to this and just going to say, no, it's none of your business, and let's get back to education.
In your notes that you sent me, say that the program is funded by a state grant and is directed toward all students likely fall of 22. Explain to me your understanding of the funding aspect of this. Is the state giving the school districts the money to do this?
Yeah, I don't know the amount exactly. It is a state program. I have confirmed that, and you can clearly see the branding on the document. Virginia Department of Health in concert with VDOE. It's a statewide program, and you'll notice in the 19-page document, they don't separate student athletes from all students. So I really believe this is something coming down from Richmond that is going to be applied at some point to all students across the state as it's currently written.
Well, I mean, as we know, there are many politicians and public health officials and even parents that are in favor of mass inoculation, mandatory in every school. They say that, of course, it's no different than the other list of vaccinations that are mandated. So it seems to be in line with the protocol.
Well, there's a duplicity here, though, because even at their own school administration building here in Ashburn, they don't even enforce masking anymore for speakers. Yet we're going to make our students, who are really the least at risk, wear a mask all day. There's been a lot of scientists look at that as well, the detrimental effects of masking on a long-term basis. So I think it's a policy that needs to be changed. A lot of parents would agree with that. I think we just need to say no to this statist mindset that the state has the right to mandate anything medically over us as free people.
You'd made mention about the lack of control, the lack of the school district having control over the content or the frequency of these testing pools. You want to comment on that a little bit more? What do you?
Well, it is interesting that in the document they actually do segment teachers from students.
Where? Let me go ahead and pull that up. Let's see if we can find that. Do you know where that is by chance?
It's, if I recall, toward the back. Talking about cohort size or sample size.
Pooled testing protocols up in that area. Diagnostic testing.
There's somewhere where it talks about, it recommends that teacher pools be limited to 5 teachers at a time instead of going to the full 25-person max. So as if a pool of teachers comes back as positive, it doesn't have a detrimental impact on the classroom coverage. Mm-hmm. But apparently for students, they're perfectly willing for them to be pooled as many as need to be. And if a positive pool comes back, they'll all have to be tested within 24 hours to avoid the positive label.
Now, what did you mean in regards to your notes about the lack of controls over these pools?
Well, when
frequency for that matter.
Well, yeah, you sign a document that consents into the program. It's very clear in multiple areas in this document that they will not test you unless that you've given them consent. So they certainly want to avoid doing testing without consent. But once you are in the program, that's when they decide what pool you're in and how frequently you test. So you are going to be told how often to test and what day to show up at what time. And what's interesting as well in this document, let me see if I can find it. It does talk in certain areas, there are going to be additional FTEs required, budget impact here for staffing this program. They'll be working with a contractor to perform the actual testing, but there's going to be other ancillary supporting roles needed to track, to trace, to go get the students out of class, to usher them back and forth. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out on the funding side.
Yeah, this one stuck out to me, and it sort of goes to what you're talking about. This, well, as many people have pointed out, it started out with 2 weeks to slow the spread, to everybody wear a mask, to we need to shut down entire societies, to now, you have to take a cocktail of 3 shots in order to be able to feed your family. I mean, this is where we've come to. So when we talk about that slippery slope, I think this graphic right here spells that out nicely. Talk to us a little bit about this and how this struck you. The first thing that jumped out to me was consider twice per week.
Yeah, right now, Sam, we're in the moderate category in Loudoun County. I don't know where Fairfax is. Our rate of transmission is 12 cases per 100,000. If you go to the demographic area of the VDH website. So that's why right now, if the testing program were implemented today, the teachers and students that are unvaccinated who submit to this program would be tested once a week. Mm-hmm. You see there's a column for students, and there's also a separate column for athletics. So the fact that they're including students in general, that's why I believe it's geared eventually to the entire student population across the state, if this whole program even stands.
Well, it states right here, once it gets up to moderate, you said that we are in moderate now, or you are up there in Loudoun County. Well, then there you go. In that column, there's the green check that states that all students are going to be subject to this.
And then if we go to substantial, if we go to 50 cases per 100,000 or more, then athletics actually jumps to twice per week.
As well as staff. So if you are a teacher or a cafeteria worker or a bus driver, I'm not sure how deep this is going. Is this all staff? If they jump to there, you may have to get 2 tests per week just to keep your job. Is that what I'm seeing here?
Yes. Unvaccinated staff who consent into the program will be subject to up to twice a week, depending on what category it's in. The thing is, the mindset behind this by Dr. Ziegler, he announced this at, I believe, the first board meeting in September. It was 10:30 at night. Everyone had gone home and probably in bed. And he commented that this was a program that he felt needed to be done to protect our student athletes. Well, in reality, the transmission rate, like I said earlier, is 0.01% across the student population. Why do we have an entire mandate being issued based on that very, very low transmission rate for those under age 18, especially in my case, in my opinion, based on the VAERS data that clearly shows that incidence of harm to those under age 18 by this vaccine is not just rare and inconsequential, as some would have you know. Why do we have wrestling programs in high school that are not even coming down with COVID, but they're certainly in close contact? I just think there needs to be more thought put into this than just issuing a mandate because it makes you feel good that we're protecting our athletes, when really our kids are not at risk. They are very, very, very low rate of transmission and risk compared to older Americans. So I just think this mandate in general needs to go.
I appreciate you bringing this to our attention. Any other thoughts that you would like to point out to our audience, give them something to think about, and maybe get on the phone or send some emails and ask some questions of their own?
I would encourage them to stay in contact with their local school board representative. Keep asking good questions. There's no need to be violent. We're not domestic terrorists. Just ask thoughtful, direct questions. And hold our leaders accountable. Our board is elected. We can hold them accountable. And Dr. Ziegler is a hire of the board. So if Dr. Ziegler is doing something you don't agree with, confront that issue directly and ask your board member to do something about it. I feel like we have the right as citizens to demand the freedom that we already possess and are already given to us by our Constitution. Don't just say yes. Actually stand up for what you already possess.
I thought this was interesting as you were talking. I was scrolling through this. There's some points that jumped out at me. And I'm wondering about your thoughts about this. This is interesting. Schools conducting diagnostic testing, including testing of close contacts, are asked to report weekly aggregate data to the Department of Health. So am I reading that right? There's a pool. Somebody in the pool refuses to take the test or tests positive. Everybody has to take the individual tests. Then, if there is a positive test, the Department of Health steps in regards to the contact tracing and whatnot protocols. So is it then the school's responsibility to find out who those close contacts are and to force them to implement the test? I don't understand the wording here. Schools conducting diagnostic testing, including testing of close contacts. What?
Yeah, I think that's a little vague as well.
And a little disconcerting, might I add.
Well, this is a case. Schools will report to the Loudoun County Department of Health, right? And the Loudoun County Department of Health will open a case investigation against whoever was deemed to be COVID positive. It'll be tracked, it'll be monitored, and you will be in their database for who knows how long, unless you opt out. There is a Virginia Information System department in Richmond that you actually can opt out of having your immunizations be collected or tracked by the state. We've done that in our family. We're not a no vaccine family. Our kids have taken vaccines before. We just feel like in this case it's not necessary, and it's a pretty onerous program. I don't want my children, or if I'm a teacher, I don't want to be in a system where the state is forever going to track me, how many tests I've taken, how often I've taken them, what pools I was in. I feel like that leads us down a slippery slope that doesn't really work out well if we look at history. We don't want to create a system where we have two different classes of citizens, or especially ones that are treated sort of like, I would say, like a Dalit of Loudoun County. The unvaxxed should not be treated any differently with any less respect and dignity than the vaccinated based on the conscientious objection to this testing mandate.
Absolutely. And one other point before we close, you had talked about, I couldn't find it in the document, but the requirements for additional staffing. And in your notes that you sent me is, here we got a $2 billion business that is already struggling with crisis after crisis after crisis and shortages here. I mean, they're standing on one leg as it is. And now let's take a look at these requirements here. Testing program roles and responsibilities. School division administration, staff, and testing vendors all have a key role to play. Blah, 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 blah. So we're looking at additional staff, personnel,
ushers, logistics leads, notification managers,
additional protective equipment to collect specimens, courier services.
So, and get this, school staff on page 7, it lists all the additional roles that will be needed. They've already assumed that school staff are going to be willing to help out with this program. They're already stretched thin.
Yeah.
They're already not getting paid enough.
Ushers, logistic leads. Go ahead. I'm going to highlight some of these while you're talking. Go ahead.
So those are 3 new areas there. And then down below, there's a whole section on school staff, basically saying, hey, if we're short on any of these other areas, then school staff will help out. I'm sorry, what? So you're a teacher struggling to get your job done, and now you have to take time away from educating our kids to make sure that the testing policy is implemented. That's ridiculous.
Individuals who wish to be tested through the VISTA program must complete a consent form. Who wish to be tested, but like as you pointed out,
that's like holding a gun to your head and saying, "Do you wish to live?" I mean,
right.
If you wish to be part of your sports program, then you're going to take this test. I mean, it's just kind of a forced way to do it.
It is very strange. Individuals who are under the age of 18 and who are not legally emancipated must have consent forms signed by their parent or guardian, even after a parent or guardian is consented to testing a student. Well, now this is actually interesting. A student may refuse testing on any occasion. Wow, that's kind of interesting.
They can refuse, but sorry, you can't come play soccer anymore.
And if they refuse, then everybody in their pool is going to have to be individually tested. So there goes that peer pressure thing. Now, are these pools, from your understanding, are these pools anonymous? Do you know? Do the people know what pools they're in?
To my knowledge, the end user doesn't know, but the people designing the pool certainly know. And who knows where that could lead. Why would I, for example, what is the science behind putting me in pool A versus pool B? That's something else we just don't know yet, Sam. We don't know where this goes. One last thing I would say is page 11 in that document talks about special event testing. I thought this was pretty interesting. So VISTA program actually, they're leaving room for allowing schools to consider implementing additional testing before other types of events, like big sporting events. So can you imagine that you have to consent into the VISTA program before you can come to the high school football game on Friday night, or a school dance, or when you go on vacation, you got to make sure you're tested before you can come back to class, or any school assembly, or even graduations. It just seems like I hate to think if we are going to have to submit to a state testing program to even come see my child graduate from high school.
Wow. So as it states right here, my goodness gracious, special event testing is different from normal every day or every week pooling testing and may require different strategies. Wow. For sports events, school dances, returns from vacation is considered a special event. A school assembly, graduation, or so grandma wants to go see her grandkids in the school play. They're going to have to sign up for this. I mean, that's apparently what it looks like.
It's potentially, they're allowing schools to make that choice. They're not negotiating in this document. I'll be honest with you. I really believe this, talking from a slippery slope perspective, can lead to a marking of certain parts of the population. You have a yellow star, as we've seen in Germany.
Sure.
Think about it, where this could lead.
Well, you become a pariah in society, period.
Yeah. I mean, our own president even has mentioned cases where he feels like the unvaccinated are at risk to the population. I don't like these mandates. They're evil, and I think we need to stand up to it.
Well said, sir. Clint, appreciate everything that you are doing and being a voice of calm reason up there in a sea of chaos, man. Loudoun County, ground zero for so much of what is taking place, sweeping through this country. And, we're seeing over and over and over illustrations of so much that's wrong with our education system. And, God bless parents like you and your lovely wife that are jumping into it, and the hundreds that have been stepping into the school board halls and bravely speaking their piece and getting on national news and coming on local shows like this and sharing your story. I appreciate you bringing this VISTA program to our attention. Clint Thomas, thanks for coming on NovaNow.tv.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Like I told you before, I'm part of an educated, informed army of Loudoun parents who are just fed up. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, sir. It's been an honor. And there you have it. Well, check it out, folks, yourself. We'll put the document up on our blog page, and you can download it from Google Docs. And if you haven't seen this or you haven't heard from your local school officials as to what all this means and how this is going to affect the school district's bottom line in terms of dollars and operations, and how this may affect your very family operations, I think maybe some phone calls and emails and in-person school board commentary would be well in order. So thanks so much to our special guest tonight, Clint Thomas, who brought us this story in regards to the VISTA program here kicking off in November in Nova. I am Sam Ettaro. There's another episode of NovaNow.tv in the digital bag. Peace to you. Thanks so much for watching.